My name is Neria. And tonight, everything changes. At exactly 8 o'clock, in front of everyone, I will tear down the illusion I helped build. Not with screams, not with accusations, but with silence, precision, and one undeniable truth. They think they came here for a celebration. What they do not know is that they've walked into a reckoning. I stand in the center of my living room, surrounded by streamers, flickering candles, and paper lanterns swaying slightly in the summer breeze. The scent of vanilla frosting mixes with the crisp bite of chilled champagne. Balloons hover like watchers in the corners. Every inch of this house was prepared to celebrate Aiden's birthday. Every detail is immaculate. Every color chosen. Every song on the playlist deliberate. But none of it is about him anymore. From the outside, I'm the perfect hostess. Smiling as the doorbell rings. Hugging guests. Laughing at half-heard jokes. Accepting compliments on the decorations I set up for the man I promised to marry. They see poise. Warmth. Loyalty. But they don't see the truth pulsing behind my eyes, the storm rising with every passing second. I don't need to scream to break someone. You don't need blood to make a war unforgettable. 3 days ago, I received a video. No sender. No message. Just a file. When I pressed play, the world I knew cracked. Not because I didn't suspect. Not because it was unexpected. But because seeing it, hearing his voice, watching his hands on her, made it real in a way I couldn't undo. She's someone we both know. Someone in this house right now. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't run. Instead, I chose to set the stage. This night, this party, this perfect illusion, it's my answer. Not revenge. Not theatrics. Truth. I owe myself that. The guests fill the room, their joy loud and oblivious. The clock reads 6:50 in the evening. Aiden should arrive soon, with that same rehearsed smile, carrying his fake gratitude like a shield. I wonder if he rehearsed what he'll say if ever confronted. I wonder if Rachel knows she's part of tonight's performance. People laugh. They toast. Someone sings out a terrible birthday song parody. I laugh, too. They think it's real. They think I'm real. I just a candle on the cake, chocolate with hazelnut, his favorite. The irony curls in my chest. I wonder if he'll still like it after tonight. I wonder if he'll ever eat chocolate cake again without tasting shame. I feel nothing. Or maybe I feel everything, tangled into something unnameable. The kind of silence that comes before an explosion. The stillness that warns sailors a storm is coming. That's what tonight is, a calm before collapse. And I'm the tide. Someone calls my name. I turn, smiling. They say the house looks beautiful. I thank them. Another voice says he's almost here. My fingers tighten around the wine glass in my hand, but my smile doesn't move. They don't know they're part of something larger. No one here does. But they will. Tonight, I show them what betrayal looks like with lights dimmed and the world watching. And I will not look away. The door swings open. Aiden walks in, carrying a bouquet of blue and silver balloons in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other, the same brand he brought on our first date. He wears that smile, the one everyone believes, the one that won me over once. It stretches across his face like a mask painted in charm, lighting up his hazel eyes with something that looks like joy. People cheer. Someone yells, surprise, and the room explodes into claps and laughter. He laughs, too. That effortless, rehearsed laugh that falls from his mouth like it belongs to him. For everyone watching, it's a beautiful moment, friends surrounding the birthday boy, music swelling, drinks raised in celebration. But for me, it's theater. A fragile set built on rot. He walks toward me, arms opening wide, and I step into his embrace. His cologne hits me instantly, cedar and spice, familiar and false. His lips brush my cheek, and he whispers, "This is amazing. You did all this?" I nod. Of course. Happy birthday, Aiden. It's the last time I'll say those words to him. The room buzzes with conversation as he moves through the guests, hugging friends, laughing with old coworkers, posing for pictures. Every interaction is a performance. Every gesture calculated. I watch him closely, the way he tilts his head when someone tells a story, the way he touches people when he speaks, shoulders, arms, hands. He's charming, magnetic, and utterly empty. Then, across the room, it happens. My eyes lock with hers. Rachel. She stands near the dining table, holding a glass of champagne, her lips wrapped around the rim in a delicate sip that doesn't fool me. Her hair is perfectly styled, and she wears a dress I've seen before, one I once complimented at another party. She looks like everyone else, pleasant, festive, polished. But I see it. The flicker in her eyes. The way her shoulders tense when she realizes I'm watching. She breaks eye contact first. That's all I need. My heart doesn't race. My breathing doesn't change. I've prepared for this moment longer than I ever expected to. She thinks it's over. She thinks I don't know. She thinks she's safe behind the illusion we've all agreed to play along with. But tonight, I'm tearing the illusion apart. I move through the crowd slowly, making small talk, answering questions, checking on the food. I feel eyes on me, compliments raining down, about the decorations, the cake, how lucky Aiden is. I nod. I smile. But my focus stays sharp. I see every glance Rachel throws toward Aiden, and every time his hand lingers a second too long on her arm during a casual hello. No one notices. Except me. At 7:30, I step outside for air. The porch is empty. A couple of guests are smoking at the far end of the driveway, their voices muffled. I take a deep breath and close my eyes. The video is saved on a hidden USB, plugged discreetly into the back of the living room television. The slideshow will begin with photos of Aiden, childhood, college, us. Then, just when they're relaxed, just when they think it's all safe and sweet, the footage will shift. The betrayal will bleed into the screen. And no one will be able to look away. Behind me, the door opens. I turn, and it's Rachel. She steps out, pretending not to see me at first, then offers a forced smile. You did a beautiful job, Neria. The place looks amazing. I nod, my voice measured. Thanks. I wanted everything to be unforgettable. Her smile falters, just slightly. She nods again and looks away, sipping her drink. We stand in silence. Then she says, too casually, you and Aiden seem really happy. I look at her. Let the silence stretch just long enough to bite. Do we? Her throat moves, one quick swallow. I mean, yeah. You two always seemed solid. I offer her a soft, deliberate smile. I guess we'll see. She blinks. The tension sharpens, like a held breath. Then the door opens again, and Aiden appears, grinning. There you two are. Thought you disappeared. He wraps an arm around me and kisses my temple. Rachel laughs, awkwardly. The moment passes for them. But it doesn't for me. I check the time. 25 minutes left. Let the countdown begin. 3 days before the party, Neria sat in her bedroom, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor, her phone buzzing beside her on the nightstand. It was an anonymous message, no name, no words, just a video file. The thumbnail was dark, almost unrecognizable, but her gut clenched the moment she saw it. Something inside her already knew. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. The video began innocently enough, muffled laughter, dim lighting, a moment of clumsy camera adjustment. Then it stabilized. A man, unmistakably Aiden, entered the frame. His voice. His gestures. The way he leaned against the wall, casual and confident. He wasn't alone. The woman appeared seconds later, Rachel. Her laugh was unmistakable, lighter and higher than usual, but still her. The two were close, too close, and in moments, the context shifted. Touches became caresses. Words became whispers. Clothes blurred into skin. And Nerya watched, frozen, as truth crushed her from the inside out. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't throw the phone across the room like a character in a cheap drama. She simply let it play. All of it. Twice. 3 times. Until the numbness set in like concrete. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the paused frame of Aiden's hand brushing Rachel's hair behind her ear. She stared at it until night fell, until silence drowned everything. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the choice of person. Rachel wasn't a stranger. She was part of their circle, present in countless memories, dinners, game nights. She'd hugged Nerya just last week. And now she was a shadow contaminating every moment that came before. Nerya didn't confront Aiden. Not immediately. She didn't even hint at knowing. Instead, something colder took root. A clarity sharper than rage. She began to plan, not for revenge, but for revelation. The truth would not be thrown like a punch in a hallway argument. It would be unwrapped, slowly, deliberately, under the lights of a party he thought was for him. She spent the next 2 days preparing. Not just decorations and food, but the framework of what would become an unforgettable night. She converted the video into a disguised file, blending it into a slideshow of photos she pulled from Aiden's social media, old hard drives, shared albums. She ensured it was timed perfectly, no glitches, no delays. At exactly 8 o'clock, during the tribute everyone would expect, the real footage would appear. She placed the USB drive behind the television in the living room, taping it carefully so it wouldn't be disturbed. She tested it twice when no one was around. Everything worked. There would be no room for denial. On the outside, she continued to play her role. Invitations confirmed. Menu finalized. Smiles given freely to anyone who asked how the preparations were going. Aiden kissed her goodbye each morning, still lying with the ease of someone convinced they were untouchable. Nerya let him. Let the days move forward. Let the storm gather quietly. She even spoke to Rachel once more, during a brief exchange in a group message. The woman responded casually, a smiley face at the end of a sentence. The audacity burned like acid, but Nerya's reply was polite. Pleasant. Deceptively unbroken. The night before the party, Nerya stood in the empty living room, checking the setup one last time. Lights adjusted. Cables hidden. Champagne glasses stacked. The screen where the truth would be displayed stood like an altar awaiting fire. She didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She just stood still, breathing slowly, absorbing the silence. She knew what some might say, that she should walk away quietly, avoid the spectacle, spare herself the chaos. But those people hadn't watched the man they loved wrap his arms around someone else in secret. They hadn't seen the lie unfold in high definition, unfiltered, unavoidable. They hadn't lived in a silence so thick it choked. This wasn't about punishing Aiden. It wasn't even about humiliating Rachel. It was about reclaiming her voice, in the most public, irreversible way possible. She had allowed the performance for too long. Now, the curtain would fall. By the time the guests arrived, every detail was in place. She welcomed them all with warmth, letting the weight of what was coming sit quietly beneath her skin. She could feel it building, the moment when the video would play, when the air would change, when faces would freeze in disbelief. And when Aiden arrived, smiling like nothing had ever cracked the surface of his perfect life, Nerya knew, this night was no longer his. It never had been. The party had settled into a rhythm, the kind that follows the initial excitement and slips into comfort. Music flowed softly through the rooms, laughter bounced off the walls, and glasses clinked steadily with toasts that grew more careless as the drinks multiplied. Aiden was in his element, moving from group to group like a seasoned performer, accepting compliments with a modesty so polished it felt almost rehearsed. Nerya, meanwhile, moved with purpose. Every step she took across the house was measured. Every glance at the clock was discreet. It was now 7:25 in the evening. 35 minutes until everything would come undone. She smiled when spoken to, refilled drinks, nodded along with stories. To the guests, she was the image of a devoted fiancée, graceful, calm, entirely present. But beneath the surface, a different Nerya paced. One who had rehearsed this night 100 times. Who knew the precise second the lights would dim. Who had timed her announcement to the minute. She didn't need to rush. The countdown had already begun. At the corner of the living room, an old friend from college was showing Aiden a video on his phone, both of them laughing. Across the room, Rachel stood with two others, her smile thinner than before, her gaze flicking too often toward Nerya. The room was buzzing, alive, unaware of the charge building beneath its feet. Nerya paused near the kitchen and took a slow breath. She could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. Not fear. Not anymore. Anticipation. She ran through the plan once more in her mind, as she had done every day since receiving the video. At exactly 8 o'clock, she would lift her glass and gently tap it with a spoon. The music would lower, she had already cued the pause on her phone. Then she would ask for everyone's attention and invite them to watch a tribute. They would expect nostalgia. Sentiment. Instead, they would get reality. A few minutes before the hour, she slipped into the hallway to double-check the screen and projector. The television was ready, paused on the title slide, to Aiden, A Year to Remember. The irony made her lips twitch. One press of a button, and the sequence would begin. The video was buried between smiling photos, only revealing itself halfway through. That was deliberate. She didn't want to shock them all at once. She wanted them to feel safe. And then fall. Back in the living room, someone had just uncorked another bottle of champagne. Aiden raised his glass, flashing that perfect grin. To all of you, he said. And to Nerya, for making this the best night of the year. Applause. Cheers. And still, no one suspected. Rachel was laughing again, but the sound didn't reach her eyes. She shifted from foot to foot, restless, as if sensing the pressure tightening around her. Nerya met her gaze from across the room. Held it. Didn't blink. Rachel looked away. 7:53. Nerya moved through the room once more, this time slower, collecting empty plates and folding napkins, giving the impression of a hostess winding things down. A few people started settling in on couches and armchairs, the mood shifting toward quiet contentment. The perfect moment to introduce something new. She stepped beside Aiden, touched his arm gently. In a few minutes, I'm going to show everyone something. He smiled. A surprise? She returned the smile, steady and unreadable. Exactly that. He kissed her cheek. You're incredible, you know that? Nerya didn't answer. 7:57. She walked to the table near the television, checking the remote discreetly. Her fingers brushed against it like it was something sacred. Behind her, conversations were softening. People were sipping slowly now, slipping into that final phase of the evening where the memories start to settle. 7:59. She stepped forward, lifted her glass, and tapped it twice with a spoon. A high, clear note rang through the room. The noise died instantly. All heads turned. All eyes found her. She smiled once more. It was the calm before detonation. The sharp chime of the glass echoed like a bell announcing a verdict. Conversations fell silent. Laughter ceased mid-breath. Every eye in the room turned toward Nerya, who stood poised, her expression composed, a half-filled glass of champagne held delicately in one hand. The silence deepened, expectant. Aiden smiled beside her, clearly amused by the sudden attention. What's this? He asked, loud enough for a few guests to hear. A toast? Nerya didn't answer him. She turned to the crowd, voice calm, unwavering. Thank you all for coming tonight. It means a lot to both of us. I know how much Aiden values his friends, and I wanted this birthday to be something unforgettable. Polite claps followed, a few scattered cheers. Aiden nodded, raising his glass in appreciation. But instead of a toast, Neria continued, I thought it would be more meaningful to show a short video. A little tribute. A look back at the year Aiden had. A soft murmur of interest spread through the room. Some shifted in their seats. Others smiled knowingly, expecting childhood photos, funny clips, a few embarrassing moments. The projector turned on, casting a faint glow across the living room. The screen lit up with the first image, Aiden as a child, grinning with cake smeared across his face. A few chuckles. Someone called out, "Oh no, here we go!" The montage began harmlessly enough, vacation photos, candid shots at parties, a video snippet of Aiden dancing awkwardly at a wedding. Friends laughed. People nudged each other, delighted by the harmless nostalgia. Neria stood at the edge of the room, silent. Watching. Aiden laughed too, visibly touched. He turned toward her, gave her a look of surprised gratitude. "This is great," he whispered. She didn't respond. 2 minutes into the video, the tone shifted. It was subtle at first. The background music faded to a near whisper. The photos slowed. The next slide came without any transition, a grainy video thumbnail, darker, unfamiliar. The clip began to play. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just a dimly lit hallway, voices murmuring in the background. Then a face appeared on the screen. Aiden. Not from a memory or a party, but from a moment that had never been meant for public eyes. The angle shifted. Another face. Rachel. Laughter. Movement. His hand on her waist. Her fingers tangled in his hair. A hush fell over the room. For a second, there was confusion. Faces turned toward each other, waiting for the joke, the twist, the context. But it didn't come. The footage became unmistakable. Aiden, kissing Rachel. Her arms around his neck. His voice, clear, affectionate, familiar, saying her name like it belonged to him. Gasps filled the space like smoke after a spark. Someone whispered, "Is that?" Another said, louder, "Wait, what is this?" The screen continued without pause. The camera shifted, showing Rachel's face in profile, her voice answering softly, intimately. There was no ambiguity. No room for doubt. Aiden stood frozen. His smile had vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. His body was stiff, his eyes wide. Rachel, standing across the room, dropped her glass. The sound of it shattering on the floor jolted a few guests into motion. Someone stood. Someone else reached for the remote, uncertain. But Neria stepped forward first. "Don't," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let it finish." The command in her voice was undeniable. No one moved. On screen, the final seconds played out, Aiden and Rachel disappearing into a bedroom. The door closing. Silence. The video ended. The room remained still, thick with disbelief. Neria turned toward the crowd. Her expression hadn't changed. No tears. No rage. Just clarity. "Now that everyone has seen what I saw," she said, her voice even, sharp as a blade, "I think I can finally say what I've been holding in for weeks." The silence that followed was not just awkward, it was oppressive. A heavy, breathless void filled the room as if the walls themselves had absorbed the shock and were holding it tight around every guest. Eyes blinked but didn't move. Fingers twitched but didn't reach for glasses or phones. It was the kind of silence that didn't wait for explanation because the truth had already been declared, frame by frame, in front of them all. Aiden still hadn't moved. He stood at the center of it all, one hand slightly raised, caught mid-gesture, his mouth parted but unable to form any sound. His eyes remained fixed on the now dark screen, where moments ago, the worst parts of him had been made public. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between disbelief and dread, the collapse of control etched across his face. Rachel had backed away from the broken glass at her feet, her champagne pooling in tiny rivulets across the floorboards. Her face was pale, almost translucent. Her lips moved, mouthing something silently, a denial or a plea, but no sound followed. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She simply stared forward, as if the footage were still playing and she was trapped within it. The rest of the guests remained seated, frozen in disbelief. Some had hands over their mouths. Others simply looked down, unwilling to meet anyone's gaze. Whispers began slowly, quiet, tentative phrases exchanged like contraband in a room that had become a crime scene. Was that really her? When was this? How long had she known? Only one person moved with purpose, Neria. She stepped forward with deliberate calm, positioning herself in front of the screen, between the wreckage of false smiles and shattered illusions. Her eyes, once filled with practiced warmth, now burned with a composed fury that didn't need volume or violence to make itself known. I debated showing this, she began, voice cutting through the hush like a razor. I thought maybe it was enough that I knew. That I could walk away and keep the peace. Let him go quietly. Let her pretend she was still my friend. But the truth doesn't rot in silence. It spreads. It poisons. And I decided I wouldn't carry that poison alone. No one interrupted. No one dared. Aiden finally shifted, taking a breath as if emerging from underwater. Neria, he said, barely audible. She turned her eyes to him. He fell silent again. I've watched all of you for weeks, she continued, her voice steadier than even she expected. Smiling. Laughing. Telling me how lucky I am. How happy we look together. And I kept thinking, how far could this lie stretch? How many of you knew? How many saw the signs and said nothing? Her eyes moved across the room. No one met them. Rachel took a single step forward, her voice cracking. Neria, please, don't, Neria said sharply, turning her gaze to her. Not here. Not now. Rachel froze, words swallowed whole. Someone near the back whispered, Jesus, barely audible. Another guest, a woman in a green dress who had once been a bridesmaid in waiting, stood abruptly. I didn't know. I swear. I believe you, Neria replied. This wasn't for you. She returned her gaze to Aiden, who had now lowered his eyes to the floor. This was for him, she said. To see what he really looks like when the lights are on. Aiden tried again, stepping forward, reaching out slightly. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, she cut in. Because I watched it. Over and over. Every second of it. I saw how you looked at her. How you touched her. How you lied with your whole body. And then you came home. To me. He opened his mouth again, but she raised a hand. Stop. Just stop. She turned away, not to escape, but to end it on her own terms. Her hand slipped the engagement ring from her finger. It came off easily, cleanly, like something never meant to stay. She stood still, holding it between her fingers, letting the silence return once more, now heavier than ever. Then, she walked forward, calm, composed, and placed the ring on the table beside the empty champagne bottle that had once been meant for a toast. No one spoke. No one moved. The beginning of the end had arrived. And no one could pretend otherwise. Aiden stood motionless, as if the air around him had thickened into something solid. He stared at the engagement ring resting on the table, a tiny, shining symbol now heavy with finality. Around him, the room still hadn't breathed. Conversations were gone. Music forgotten. The only sound was the faint hum of electricity behind the television, like the house itself was holding its breath. Rachel hadn't moved either. Her hands were clutched together in front of her, white-knuckled. Her eyes flicked from the ring to Neria, to Aiden, to the door, as if calculating a way out that wouldn't draw more attention. But there was no exit from a truth that loud. Neria stood between them, and for a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she turned to face Aiden once more. Her posture never changed, shoulders squared, gaze level, presence steady. But the weight of her silence was devastating. Aiden swallowed hard, stepping forward half a pace, desperate to fill the void with something, an apology, an excuse, even a denial. But no words came. You were never careful, Neria said at last, her voice low but unshakable. That's what I realized. You weren't subtle. You were sloppy. You trusted that I would never look too closely. You relied on me being the woman who forgives, who rationalizes, who looks the other way. Aiden looked up at her, his eyes full of something like regret. Or maybe just panic. It wasn't. I mean, I never meant to. You meant everything, she interrupted. You meant it every time you touched her. Every time you chose to stay one more hour, lie one more time, smile at me while your hands were still marked with her perfume. You meant it every time you let her sit at our table and pretend to be my friend. Rachel flinched, visibly, but Neria didn't look at her. Not yet. She was at our house, Neria continued. She hugged me. Asked me for recipes. Complimented my clothes. She laughed at my jokes. And all the while, she was part of a lie you both fed me with smiling faces. The room shifted, barely, a rustle of discomfort, a few guests glancing toward the door, toward each other, unsure of whether they were witnessing something too personal or too public. But no one moved to leave. Neria finally turned to Rachel. I don't know what you thought you were to him, she said, her tone flat. Maybe you thought you were the secret. Maybe you thought you were the escape. But you were neither. You were just part of the same performance. Rachel tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She shook her head slowly, her voice weak. I didn't want to hurt you, you just didn't care if you did, Neria replied. There's a difference. Aiden stepped forward again, this time with more urgency. Please. This isn't the place. We can talk, just you and me. This is exactly the place, Neria said. Because this is where you performed your love for me. In front of them. With all of them as your audience. So now they can be the audience for the ending, too. Her words landed like stone against glass. Final. Sharp. Irrefutable. Aiden's shoulders sank. He looked down, defeated, as if the weight of what he'd done had finally found its way past his defenses. But it was too late. Regret had no power here. Neria took a breath. The hard part was over. What came now was release. I'm not angry anymore, she said, almost gently. Not the way I was. I've already spent my nights pacing rooms, replaying moments, asking myself what I did wrong. But I didn't fail you. I trusted you. I loved you. And you betrayed that. That's on you. Not me. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. She turned to the rest of the room, her gaze passing over friends and acquaintances, some with tears in their eyes, some frozen in shame. I know this wasn't what you expected tonight, she said. And I'm sorry for the discomfort. But I needed to stop pretending. For too long, I lived inside a lie. Tonight, I stepped out of it. She paused, letting the words settle. Then, without looking back, she walked toward the hallway. No one stopped her. No one could. Neria's steps were silent as she moved through the hallway, the soft click of her heels muffled by the carpet beneath her feet. The sounds of the party, or what remained of it, faded behind her. She didn't look back. There was nothing left to face. No more words to say. No more truths to unveil. She had said everything that needed to be said, and done what needed to be done. She reached the bedroom and stood there for a moment in stillness. The door remained half open, a symbol of how everything between them had always seemed, never fully closed, never fully honest. She pushed it open slowly and stepped inside. On the dresser sat the box that once held her engagement ring, now empty. Its velvet lining looked untouched, pristine, as though it had never carried anything at all. She stared at it for a long second, then closed the lid. Back in the living room, the weight of what had been revealed hung over every guest like a dense fog. No one had turned the music back on. The lights still glowed too brightly, a painful contrast to the heavy stillness in the air. People whispered in corners, voices low and uneasy. Some guests quietly gathered their things, unsure whether it was more respectful to leave or to stay. Rachel was gone. At some point, without a word, she had slipped out the front door, disappearing into the night like the ghost of a mistake no one would admit to inviting. A few noticed, but no one followed. Aiden remained standing, his posture now slumped, his face drawn and pale. He looked less like a man caught in a scandal and more like someone who had witnessed his own unraveling. And in many ways, he had. The image he had so carefully crafted, the relationship he had paraded proudly, both had been torn away with brutal honesty. When Neria returned to the room, it wasn't to seek applause or sympathy. It was to finish what she had started. She crossed the space slowly, walking up to Aiden without flinching. He looked at her, hopeful for a second, desperate for something he couldn't name. She stopped in front of him and removed the final piece. The engagement ring wasn't on her finger anymore, but she hadn't left it behind. From her pocket, she pulled it out, small and gleaming under the lights, and held it in her palm. No words. No explanation. Just a quiet moment as she extended her hand and placed it gently back into his. He didn't close his fingers around it. He didn't speak. The ring sat there, cold and weightless, a token of a future that would never come. Neria turned away and faced the guests. "Tonight," she said, voice steady and low, "I ended something I should have ended a long time ago." No one interrupted. She looked around the room, at the people who had celebrated with her, laughed with her, shared moments that now felt like echoes of a life she no longer belonged to. This wasn't about revenge, she said. It wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about telling the truth. Out loud. With no more pretending. Her gaze fell briefly on a couple in the corner who looked visibly shaken, close friends, once part of every double date, every shared plan. "Some of you knew," she added, softly. "Some of you suspected. And some of you will try to forget what you saw tonight. That's fine. That's your story." She turned back to Aiden one last time. "This was mine." Then, with nothing left to hold her there, she walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped outside. The night air greeted her like a second skin, cool, clear, unsentimental. She paused for a breath, letting the silence embrace her, no longer heavy but clean. A breeze stirred her hair as she looked up at the stars scattered across the dark sky. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She simply walked away. Not as the woman betrayed, not as the fiancé left behind, but as the woman who had chosen herself. The house was almost unrecognizable in the early morning light. Sunlight slipped through the half-closed curtains, revealing the remnants of a celebration that had mutated into something else entirely. Glitter on the floor. Half-empty glasses on every surface. A sagging string of streamers hung crookedly across the living room, as if the house itself had given up pretending. Neria stood alone in the center of it all. The guests had left hours ago, most of them in silence, offering murmured words that failed to fill the space they exited. No one had truly known what to say. A few tried. One woman offered a trembling "You're brave," while another man muttered, "You didn't deserve that," before slipping out the door. But most simply lowered their eyes and walked away, shoes crunching softly over fallen confetti. Rachel had disappeared without speaking another word. Aiden had lingered for nearly an hour after the others, his presence like a shadow that refused to detach from the walls. He tried to speak once, then twice, but Neria gave him nothing in return. Not even a glance. Eventually, he left. The door clicked behind him like the final line of a story no one would reread. Now, with the sun rising, Neria began collecting the pieces. She didn't rush. She moved slowly, deliberately. Empty plates into the trash. Wine bottles into a box. She wiped the counters, picked up shards of the broken champagne flute Rachel had dropped, vacuumed the glitter left under the projector screen. She did it all in silence. Not numbed, not robotic, but present. She felt the ache in her back, the rawness in her throat. The weight of the night hadn't left her, but it had settled. There was no catharsis. No relief. Only clarity. She paused once, sitting on the edge of the couch with a crumpled napkin in her hands. It still smelled faintly of vanilla and candle smoke. Her eyes lingered on the television screen, blank now, dark, lifeless. The same screen that had ended everything just hours earlier. And yet, the silence wasn't haunting. It was honest. The chaos had passed. In its wake, there was only space. Wide, unfamiliar space. The kind that comes after rupture, when nothing feels familiar but everything feels possible. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. Messages were flooding in. Some were from friends, half in shock, half in support. "I'm so sorry you went through that. I'm here if you need anything. I had no idea. You didn't deserve that." Others were less helpful. "Was that really the right way to do it? Maybe you should have handled it in private." And, of course, there were the posts. Someone had shared a blurry video taken during the tribute. It was already making rounds in their social circles, captioned, speculated, dissected. People who hadn't been at the party were suddenly authorities on what Nerya felt, why she did what she did, how she should have acted. She scrolled for a moment, then placed the phone face down. The world could say what it wanted. It hadn't lived inside her chest these past weeks. It hadn't watched the man she trusted with her future dissolve it behind her back. She looked around the room one last time. The decorations were down. The guests were gone. The celebration was over. But more than anything else, the lie was gone too. For the first time in months, maybe longer, Nerya didn't feel the need to smile for anyone. She didn't feel the pressure to perform or protect or pretend. She just sat there. Breathing. Not planning. Not remembering. Just existing. Morning arrived without ceremony. Sunlight crept through the curtains, casting long lines across the floor of a house that still wore the remains of a celebration gone sour. The decorations, deflated and crooked, seemed to mock what had once been joyful. Empty glasses stood like witnesses. The silence now wasn't heavy with tension, it was hollow, like the aftermath of something broken. Nerya sat on the edge of her bed for a long time before reaching for her phone. She didn't need to open it to know what waited. Still, when the screen lit up, it was worse than she imagined. Dozens of messages, missed calls, tagged videos. A clip, shaky, poorly framed, had already been shared by someone at the party. It captured the moment just before the truth erupted. Her voice was clear. So was Aiden's face when the footage shifted. It had spread. Not across the world. But far enough. Their friends, their coworkers, people she hadn't spoken to in years, all of them now had opinions about her story. She scrolled, slowly, through messages. "You're incredible. I wish I had your strength. I'm so sorry you went through this. You didn't deserve it. I always had a weird feeling about him. But others were more pointed. Was it really necessary to humiliate him like that? You could have handled it differently. Some things are meant to be private." Nerya didn't reply to any of them. She put the phone down and walked into the kitchen, making coffee out of habit more than desire. The quiet clink of the spoon against the mug was the only sound in the room. She didn't drink it. She just sat there, fingers wrapped around the warmth, staring at the table where, less than 24 hours ago, she had placed the engagement ring. Outside, the world had continued. People walked dogs. Children played on sidewalks. Somewhere, someone was laughing at a screen, completely unaware of the night that had just reshaped her life. That, more than anything, struck Nerya, that the world didn't pause for grief. Or betrayal. It kept moving. And she would have to move with it. Later that day, she went out for the first time, walking slowly to the local store for groceries she didn't truly need. It was the same path she always took. The same faces passed her. But the looks were different now. Recognizing. Cautious. Some people avoided her gaze. Others offered small, awkward nods. No one dared speak, but the silence between them carried weight. They had seen the video. Or heard about it. Or simply knew someone who had. It didn't matter. The story was out, and now it walked ahead of her wherever she went. At the register, the cashier hesitated before saying her usual hello. She smiled politely, but it was the kind of smile given to someone you've seen cry in public. Pity masked as warmth. Nerya accepted it without reacting. She didn't flinch. She didn't explain. She simply paid, took her bag, and left. The knock came 3 days later. It wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. Just a soft rhythm against the front door that made Nerya pause mid-step in the hallway. She didn't move at first. Her hands rested on the edge of a chair, her breath caught between suspicion and expectation. Then, slowly, she crossed the living room and opened the door. Aiden stood there. He looked different now. Tired. Smaller. Like something vital had been drained from him. His clothes were neat, but his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. He held a single envelope in one hand, and when he saw her face, he swallowed hard, unsure how to speak. "Nerya," he said, voice quiet. She didn't answer. "I just wanted to," he began, then stopped. Words failed him, just as they had at the party. He looked down at the envelope, then back at her. "Can I come in?" She shook her head once. Aiden hesitated, then extended the envelope toward her. "It's not an apology. I know that wouldn't fix anything. It's just something I needed to say. On paper. Because when I try to speak, I ruin it." Nerya took the envelope, but didn't open it. Her eyes didn't soften. Her posture didn't shift. "Goodbye, Aiden," she said. He opened his mouth to say more, but thought better of it. After a long, hollow pause, he nodded and turned away. She watched him walk down the steps, hands in his pockets, the weight of consequences trailing behind him like a shadow that would never leave. She closed the door. Later that afternoon, she met with her friend Clara, someone who hadn't attended the party, but who had known her long enough to read between lines others ignored. They sat on the balcony of Clara's apartment, coffee cooling in their hands, the city humming quietly below. "I heard," Clara said softly. "I wasn't there, but everyone's talking." Nerya nodded. Clara looked at her, frowning. "You okay?" "I'm not broken," Nerya said. "Just tired." She didn't elaborate. Not until much later, when the sky had turned orange and the air was thick with evening stillness, did she speak again. And when she did, her voice was quieter. "You know," she said, "that wasn't the first time." Clara looked over. Aiden. There was no need for further explanation. "I didn't tell anyone," Nerya continued. "Not even you. Not the first time. Or the second. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That it would pass. That he was confused. That I wasn't enough, maybe." Clara didn't interrupt. "I found messages. A long time ago. Before we were even engaged. I confronted him, and he swore it was nothing. Said it was emotional, not physical. That he was drunk. That he was lonely." She scoffed at her own memory. "I wanted to believe him. So I did." She looked down at her cup, now cold. "But after that, something in me changed. I started watching closer. Listening differently. And when I got that video," her voice faded, then returned with new clarity. "I knew I couldn't keep carrying it alone. It wasn't just about me and him. It was about all the ways I silenced myself to protect something that never protected me." Clara reached out, resting a hand over hers. "You didn't deserve that." "No," Nerya said. "I didn't." They sat in silence again, but it was a softer silence. Not the silence of secrecy or shame. A silence of understanding. When Nerya left later that night, she felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. She had finally said the one thing no one else had known. This wasn't her breaking point. It was her decision point. The choice not to endure. The choice to end the pattern. To show the truth not just for others, but for herself. So she would never forget how far she had come. The knock came 3 days later. It wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. Just a soft rhythm against the front door that made Nerya pause mid-step in the hallway. She didn't move at first. Her hands rested on the edge of a chair, her breath caught between suspicion and expectation. Then, slowly, she crossed the living room and opened the door. Aiden stood there. He looked different now. Tired. Smaller. Like something vital had been drained from him. His clothes were neat, but his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. He held a single envelope in one hand, and when he saw her face, he swallowed hard, unsure how to speak. "Nerya," he said, voice quiet. She didn't answer. "I just wanted to," he began, then stopped. Words failed him, just as they had at the party. He looked down at the envelope, then back at her. "Can I come in?" She shook her head once. Aiden hesitated, then extended the envelope toward her. "It's not an apology. I know that wouldn't fix anything. It's just something I needed to say. On paper. Because when I try to speak, I ruin it." Nerya took the envelope, but didn't open it. Her eyes didn't soften. Her posture didn't shift. "Goodbye, Aiden," she said. He opened his mouth to say more, but thought better of it. After a long, hollow pause, he nodded and turned away. She watched him walk down the steps, hands in his pockets, the weight of consequences trailing behind him like a shadow that would never leave. She closed the door. Later that afternoon, she met with her friend Clara, someone who hadn't attended the party, but who had known her long enough to read between lines others ignored. They sat on the balcony of Clara's apartment, coffee cooling in their hands, the city humming quietly below. "I heard," Clara said softly. "I wasn't there, but everyone's talking." Nerya nodded. Clara looked at her, frowning. "You okay?" "I'm not broken," Nerya said. "Just tired." She didn't elaborate. Not until much later, when the sky had turned orange and the air was thick with evening stillness, did she speak again. And when she did, her voice was quieter. "You know," she said, "that wasn't the first time." Clara looked over. "Aiden." There was no need for further explanation. "I didn't tell anyone," Nerya continued. "Not even you. Not the first time. Or the second. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That it would pass. That he was confused. That I wasn't enough, maybe." Clara didn't interrupt. "I found messages. A long time ago. Before we were even engaged. I confronted him, and he swore it was nothing. Said it was emotional, not physical. That he was drunk. That he was lonely." She scoffed at her own memory. "I wanted to believe him. So I did." She looked down at her cup, now cold. "But after that, something in me changed. I started watching closer. Listening differently. And when I got that video," her voice faded, then returned with new clarity. "I knew I couldn't keep carrying it alone. It wasn't just about me and him. It was about all the ways I silenced myself to protect something that never protected me." Clara reached out, resting a hand over hers. "You didn't deserve that." "No," Nerya said. "I didn't." They sat in silence again, but it was a softer silence. Not the silence of secrecy or shame. A silence of understanding. When Nerya left later that night, she felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. She had finally said the one thing no one else had known. This wasn't her breaking point. It was her decision point. The choice not to endure. The choice to end the pattern. To show the truth not just for others, but for herself. So she would never forget how far she had come. The evening air carried the scent of rosemary and grilled vegetables. Laughter spilled from the open windows of Neria's apartment, soft and genuine, punctuated by the clink of glasses and the occasional off-key hum of someone singing along to a forgotten song. The dining table was modest, wooden, worn at the edges, but it was surrounded by people who filled the space with something deeper than decoration, presence. It had been exactly 1 year. 12 months since the night everything changed. Since the silence cracked open, the mask shattered, and the truth burned its way into every corner of her life. And now, here she was, on the same date, in a different home, with a different rhythm in her breath. There were only 6 guests tonight. Close friends. Real ones. The kind who had sat with her in the quiet, not just danced beside her in the noise. Clara was there, of course, holding court at the end of the table, telling a story so animated she nearly knocked over her drink. Across from her was Omar, who'd brought dessert and insisted it was homemade, though everyone suspected otherwise. The others talked in warm tones, voices overlapping like layers of a melody that didn't need harmony to be beautiful. Neria sat between them, not in the spotlight, not at the center, but fully present. Her dress was simple. Her feet bare. She wore no makeup, only a silver ring on her right hand that she'd bought months ago, not as a replacement, but as a reminder of who she had become, of what she had let go. Someone raised a glass. To Neria, said Clara, with a grin. For hosting the only dinner party I've ever attended where nobody pretended to like each other just to keep the peace. Laughter rippled through the group. Neria smiled, lifting her glass too. They toasted. The moment was quiet but complete. Later in the evening, as the plates were cleared and the night settled into softer tones, one of the guests turned to her, curiosity in her voice. Do you ever think about it? About last year? The room hushed for a second, not uncomfortably, but out of instinct. Everyone knew what it meant. No one had to say the words. Neria didn't look away. I do, she said. Not with pain. Not anymore. Just with clarity. The guest nodded. Do you regret doing it the way you did? Neria thought about that for a moment. The lights dimmed slightly as the wind moved past the curtains. She sipped from her glass before answering. No. It was messy. Loud. Probably unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. But it was mine. And for once, I didn't make myself small to keep the peace. Silence followed, not heavy, but full of respect. Then Clara, never one for long silences, leaned forward. All right, she said with a smirk. Real question. Are we doing this again next year? Because I've already claimed the seat next to the dessert. Laughter broke the spell. Neria laughed too, this time from deep in her chest. As the night wore on and the candles melted lower, the group moved to the balcony, carrying their stories with them. Someone put on a playlist that mixed classics with guilty pleasures. Someone else poured the last of the wine. The stars hung low in the sky, quiet witnesses to a woman who had reclaimed her space. Eventually, as conversations drifted and the air turned cooler, Neria stood alone for a moment, looking out over the city. Lights blinked in faraway windows. Somewhere, someone else was living through their own ending. Or maybe their beginning. She thought about that. Thought about how pain reshapes you. How truth, once spoken, can build new ground beneath your feet. She didn't know what next year would bring. She didn't need to. Someone called her name from inside, laughing, asking where she'd hidden the extra cookies. Neria turned, her smile easy. I'll be right there, she said. And she meant it.